Okay. Welcome to the 21st Century Writer Podcast, a podcast devoted to helping you establish the mindset that will allow you you and your writing to flourish in the new world of self-publishing. My name is Diane Patterson. I'm a novelist and blogger, and with me is my co-host in podcasting.
I'm Hannah Steenbock. I'm a German writer, coach and therapist, and I'm an EFT practitioner, which we sometimes do in the podcast too. Yes. And today we're going to talk about characters.
Building characters, what you need to know about characters, and is there any shortcut to developing them? Okay, maybe that part is just me. But first, we're going to have a roundup of what Diane and Hannah have been doing this week. Hannah, you go first.
All right. Well, I actually completed a milestone. I finished my novella.
Woohoo!
I finally got around to finishing my novella, first draft, which the way I write are usually fairly clean drafts. I don't usually have to completely rewrite everything. I haven't managed to bring myself to edit it. I really needed to let it settle a little. And I will need to go through it and see if it has any boring bits and confusing pieces and whatnot. But I really think I'm good, and I want to get it off to beta readers next week. And send it off to my formatting people at the end of the month, hopefully.
Oh, wow.
Because we plan to release that in August. That's part 3 of my novella series.
We should totally do a series on how one plans one's publishing schedule, but since I have 0 to add to that topic. Well, that's cool.
And I've started, I rearranged some of my work schedule, and I started translating my very first German fantasy novel, which clocks in at 130,000 words in German, which is kind of epic.
Which probably translates to like 750,000 in English, but that's because German is a very exact language.
Actually, I think English is more exact in the meaning of each individual word. English has a larger vocabulary than German. So each word kind of has to work harder to maintain its place in the vocabulary. I actually don't think it's going to have such a different word count, to be honest.
Well, I wouldn't. I would hope that you would at least aim for about the same length, because that's a pretty hefty book.
Oh, it is. It's basically one adventure after the other. My hero does grow somewhat, which takes us to the character topic.
One darn thing after another.
Yeah, poor boy. He really goes through a lot.
So I know, have you ever done this before with one of your works? Like a story or?
I have translated short stories back and forth, either way. German to English, English to German.
Because there's a well-known romance author named Tina Folsom, who's German, but who writes in English. She actually lives in San Francisco. She does all of her own translations into German. And I've wondered how that, I mean, obviously you speak both languages quite possibly better than native speakers do, but how that feels to translate your own work into another language. How does that work?
It's basically a rewrite in the other language. It's nothing, I don't know, I don't think it feels special. I mean, I am a trained translator. I did that after graduating from school. I trained as a translator, and I have some certificates to prove it. I think translating my own stuff opens me up for more criticism of the work I'm translating, which means.
Sorry about that. I had forgotten to close the door to my office. People were starting to walk into the house.
So I'm translating this novel that I wrote about 15 years ago, and when I started that on Wednesday, I thought, oh no, I really need to go through that German novel and fix it. And I am changing little things to make it sound a little better in English. So I will do at least one, possibly two, another editing runs in the German version, and make it a little more smoother and adapt it to my current style of talking and writing. And I mean, the big plan is to eventually have both versions ready and have them formatted in the same way with the same cover and the same interior graphics. That's my dream.
Right.
And to release them at the same time. Just the German version and the English version. And that would be fun, and I don't think it'll be before next year because, I mean, hey, that's 130K.
Aren't you essentially writing a new novel? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, obviously the plot would be the same. The course of the novel would be the same, but no?
Not really. I don't think it's as much work as writing a new novel. It's the same amount of typing probably, but and of course I need to read a paragraph and think it and then rethink it in English. That's basically what I do. I read it in German, I rethink it in English and write that down, and then move to the next paragraph. So I'm not really writing an entirely new novel. I would call it rewriting in the other language, yes.
Okay. Oh. So
that's my news. Sorry,
okay.
You got sidetracked.
No, well, no. I'm really. I also know that stuff that I mean, I have been trying to clean up my office here. I've been unpacking. So my husband and I lived in the Bay Area. Lived in Cupertino. Then I moved down to LA for graduate school, and then he moved down to LA, and we bought a house in LA. We lived there for a number of years. Then we moved back up here to this house. Then we moved to a rental house while this house was getting remodeled, and then we moved back into this house. And I have found boxes from the move up from LA. That was a dozen years ago.
Anyhow, like a treasure hunt.
It's like a scary treasure hunt. It's like one of those Nicolas Cage movies, only everyone, is going to die at the end. But one of the things that I've unpacked is some of my writing, particularly from 20 years ago. I don't want to read anything that I wrote 20 years ago. And of course, at the time, I thought I was doing pretty good. So how does it feel to read a novel that you wrote 15 years ago? Are you like, that's pretty good? Or, okay, this chick needs some work. Because I know which one I'd be on if it were mine.
Well, the part I read on Wednesday was like, oh my goodness, this does need work. Oh, this is so bad. And then I moved into the next chapter and I thought, this is actually fun. I kind of like how I created that character. So it's a mixture. I really think it'll need some polishing. I'll have to bring the old style up too. What I'm doing now, I really have to look for some head hopping, which I was aware of back then already, and I've tried to avoid it. I really tried to write each chapter from the point of view of one person, but I found a couple of sentences that weren't clear. So, yeah. The thing is, I gave it to a friend. I gave her a PDF of it 2 years ago, and she put it onto her e-reader, and she loves it. She keeps asking me for the sequel and everything. So then she lent that sequel to her brother-in-law, and it was her brother-in-law, and he found the PDF and he read the story. I mean, we didn't even talk about it. I didn't realize it. And she said, you know what? He read your story and he really liked it, and he wants to read the sequel. And I thought, oh my God, I have 2 fans before it's published. So yeah, I guess it's okay.
That actually happened to me this morning. I got a message from a friend of mine who said, a woman I met in Asheville, actually, who said, I read your novella on my trip, and I immediately had to buy the next 2 books. So would you hurry up and write some more? And I'm like, that's somebody who knows me. Very few people who know me have actually read my books, and I'm like, this is great.
I love it when that happens.
Yeah, so that was a good. So this week, Okay, so by way of explanation, I don't think I've mentioned this project before, but okay. So I don't like zombies. There is one zombie book that is brilliant, and that is World War Z by Max Brooks. And I tell everyone, if you're interested in reading zombie fiction, to read that. But in general, I hate the idea of zombies. The only rational way to react if the zombie apocalypse is behind us is to kill everyone you know and then kill yourself. That is the only rational. Okay, I hate zombie stories. So my husband and my daughter sit down to watch The Walking Dead because they're looking for a show to watch, and it's on Netflix. So they start watching it, and I watch episode 1 with them, and there's a whole thing, and I'd heard that episode 1 was brilliant. So I don't know if there's a lot of discussion about this in the fan forums, but given how popular the show is, there must have been. In episode 1, Rick wakes up in the hospital, and apparently the zombie apocalypse has happened. And he still has an oozing wound in his side. So he's stumbling around Atlanta, or whatever this suburb is, and he's trying to find out what happened. And he runs across a man and his son who rescue him, first checking to make sure he's not a zombie. Mm-hmm. And at some point during the show, the father says, the gas went out a month ago. So Rick was lying in that hospital with an oozing wound in his side for over a month. Okay. No. Either he's a zombie, and I assume that there's a whole fan theory. There must be a fan theory out there about Rick being a zombie. Or everything in this show is constructed about saying what's cool as opposed to what makes sense. At that point, I was out. I didn't even see the part where he kills the little girl zombie, or I really would have been out at that point. So I don't like zombie stories.
I'm with you. I'm never going to read any of them.
So one night, I've been having horrible insomnia recently, as far as I know, not brought on by anything in particular. And one night I'm up late and I'm on a writer's forum, and they're talking about various anthologies they're putting together. And I have zero interest in any of these anthologies until they get to the post-apocalyptic romance one. And I'm like, I don't write post-apocalyptic. I don't write romance. I don't like zombies. Immediately, an idea for a post-apocalyptic zombie romance trilogy occurs to me. So I'm like, oh, Jesus, really? So I'm like, okay, I'll write the first one. And that was fun.
Cool.
And that was like my side project. Well, this week, since writing is still not going so well on the mystery novel, and maybe we can have a talk about that at some point, I've written 7,000 words on novella 2 of the post-apocalyptic zombie romance trilogy. So,
is it actually zombies?
Yes, it's actually zombies. And in fact, I decided to do something that apparently no one does in any of these zombie books, which is they're like looking at one another going, holy crap, it's the zombie apocalypse. They actually use the word zombies. Because I'm like, how is it that nobody, I read a well-reviewed, very popular zombie book that I shall not name. And I'm looking at this going, A, how is nobody using the word zombies? And B, the book opens, it has been some time since the zombie apocalypse, and these people are describing a minivan going down the freeway. And I said, no. Do you know what happens to roads when they're not maintained continuously?
Yes.
Yes. No minivan is going down that road. Maybe a Jeep, maybe a Humvee, but a minivan ain't going down that road. I have a minivan, and this minivan will survive a nuclear apocalypse. Ain't nothing going to kill the Honda Odyssey, but it's not going down that freeway. And I said, okay, this is what passes for post-apocalyptic fiction. Okay. So that's what I did this week. 7,000 words on a side project. Because I'm
writing, which is awesome.
Yes, that is. And what was the other thing that I did? Oh, well, yes, what I didn't do was read that book that you want to discuss, but
okay.
maybe that could be next week's topic, and that will force me to read it before next week.
It's not big. It's doable.
Okay. Well, last night I fell into bed, read like one article in Cracked, which is a humor magazine, and immediately passed out. So that's the kind of week I've been having. Okay, so this week we are talking about characters, the people in our stories. And of course, the biggest discussion that writers really like to bore themselves and other people with is, are characters story-driven or are they character-driven? And normally I want to walk away from anyone having that discussion, but I will put it up to my co-host and ask what she thinks of that question, and then I will explain my thinking on that question.
Well, because I'm still full of that book, which we will talk about next week.
Yes. The book, by the way, is Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker. And I've read great things about it, and Hannah has read it and has said, read it. And I'm like, I will. It's on my Kindle. I just haven't come around to it. I'm sorry. So.
I think it really is worth a read, and it really delves into character. And she's probably firmly in the camp of those people who say it's the character that drives the story. And I kind of agree. Not entirely, because of course setting and nature and whatnot, surroundings and technology level and whatever you put into your world is also going to affect what's happening to the character. I mean, you won't have a character being eaten by a dragon if you write I don't know, mysteries set in this in San Francisco today. So
yeah. Although, no, sorry, go on.
There's a plot bunny.
Yeah, I know, really.
What I do believe, and that puts me into the character camp as well. What I believe, and I think that is again part of this innate storytelling, story listening ability that we humans have. I believe we enjoy stories where someone we can relate to overcomes hardship and grows and learns and has a kind of success we can watch happening in the story, and that kind of story leaves us happy with it. We like to see the struggle, we like to see the growth, and we like to see a resolution of some kind or other. And even if the resolution is death, it still happens. A hero could die at the end of that. I mean, stories like that also work. So I think really the hero's journey is quite elemental to the story, and it's probably the part that fascinates us humans most. Just watching another human or alien or whatever person we can relate to go through this process of change and reaching a level of whatever abilities. I don't know. So I really think that the characters, and I mean that in plural, because we have the protagonist and we have the antagonist, which usually is also a person. It could be something else. It could be an alien. It could be nature. But usually it's another person. So we have at least two characters that are going to be highly important in the story. And I think they feed off each other, actually. which takes us into the whole area of conflict and goals and whatever is there, which is another part. It's part of character, but it's also part of plotting. And of course, being a coach and being trained as a therapist, I see a lot of these kind of challenges in real people. Of course, not on the scale as in the story.
So here's where you are on the hero's journey. I actually know someone, oh, well, I don't know him, but somebody that I followed online for a long time has a film degree from NYU and describes looking at his life as though it were a film and sculpting it as though it were a story. But go on.
Well, I think that is part of the same motivation. That might actually be the unifying force between my passion of being a coach and being a writer, because I keep seeing people in change. I keep seeing people develop and hopefully reach success. Mm-hmm. And that is, it is fun to see it and facilitate it as coach, and it's of course a lot of fun creating the whole story as a writer. Sometimes a little more fun even because I can control what happens as a writer to a certain degree, more so than with a client. But yeah, I do think that having a character in a story we can relate to, and having that character interact with someone that challenges this character and forces him or her to grow is really essential. So I think it totally pays to pay attention to your main character and make this main character as interesting as possible, basically. Yeah.
Well, yes. See, my belief, I don't believe that there is a dichotomy between story and character. I think, whoa, you okay? Thanks. I think that this story can only happen to that character, and this character is fated to have this story happen to them. That would be my my way of looking at that split. I think that, think of any story you can think of, and I'm trying to think of one that isn't, that doesn't have multiple sequels, because if the character changes too much, then the sequel doesn't work. But if the character doesn't change at all, then you don't have character development. So
yeah, that's right. I mean, that is the problem. Sorry, I thought that was better.
Yeah,
I think that's the challenge in every series. Like if you have a series in, I don't know, like Star Trek 7 to 8 seasons.
Yeah,
you want to have your characters grow somewhat, but they basically have to stay the same from one episode to the other. They can't just completely transform.
Well, that has been the great problem that Hollywood has run into, is that the most successful series of late have been, and now the word has completely escaped me, have been showing a pattern, showing growth, showing development. The situation has changed from episode to episode as opposed to episodic, which the networks and the major studios would prefer, because episodic you can show them in any order and it's easier to syndicate. What is the term? Okay. But yes, so if you have, okay, I'll be boring and use Star Wars.
Right. Everyone knows Star Wars.
Yes, everyone knows. Everyone uses it as an example. Does that story, if Han Solo is the main character of that story, you have to lose most of the story, right? Because it's not going to be his first inclination to go fight for the rebels. He's not going to do half the things that Luke Skywalker does, because they have different background, different ambitions, different ideals. You can still get to the whole point where Han Solo flies in to shoot the place up, but you get a completely different story. Stories and characters let's put it this way. If your story is constructed such that you can take one character out and plop another one in, you don't have a story, you have a ride at a theme park. It's actually one of the great problems, for instance, when developing a movie in Hollywood, is because, you know, if Bruce Willis leaves your movie and you get Tobey Maguire to replace him, I'm trying to think of two more dissimilar people, I can't do it, you're going to need to rewrite that script. Those are different characters that they are bringing to the party. So, okay, so which way does it happen to you first? Do you have the character or the story?
Yeah, neither and both. That's the funny thing.
Yeah.
What usually happens to me is that I start with a scene. It's like a vision. I have a scene in mind, and then I start exploring the character. Who is this person? I mean, hey, you showed up. Who are you? And I start looking around to get a sense for the setting. Where are we? Okay, there's a dragon. Looks like we're in a fantasy world. Or whoa, there's fireballs flying around. I guess there's magic here. So yes, that's how I usually enter. That's how a story idea comes to me. And I had a wonderful friend when I started out writing. And I really wish she could read German because she writes absolutely fantastic Star Trek fan fiction, and what she does is absolutely brilliant. I love it. She writes epic novels, and she's on her 8th. And
wow, that's dedication.
Which are completely unpublishable because it's Paramount property. So she distributes them to her friends, and
she could always do what Connie Willis, God, the ones who does the Miles Koskin books.
I don't know. I mean, we've talked to her about.
She started writing out Star Trek fan fiction, and her first published novel was she had taken one of her fanfic and reworked it as a standalone novel, and that started. God, what is her name? Anyhow, the woman who writes the Miles Koskin books.
I don't think it works for her. We talked about that. Everyone said you were so good, you really should write stuff that you can publish. And she really, and it's also that brilliant because she doesn't use any of the characters from the series. She created her own little world that she put firmly into the Star Trek universe. She has humans, Romulans, Vulcans, Cardassians. She plays with all these folk, and she really uses that typology well, and she weaves it all into new tales with her new species that she developed. So it's really hard to kind of file the serial numbers off. Probably wouldn't work. And she always refused that idea and said, I don't really want to be published. I just love writing the stories. So if that's that sort of decision. But I really like to, well, I was emailing with her every week. I was telling her what I was writing, and she kept coming back and asking me questions about my characters usually. She was very persistent. She kept saying, but why? Why does he do that? Why does he do this? Why does he react so? I mean, I can talk about it because it's a novel I'm translating right now that I was writing back then. So I have this young son of a count. He's the 3rd son. He is unloved by his father. So her question was, why? Why does a father hate his youngest son? Why do his brothers hate him? And I figured out some ideas, and I started creating this whole family background. And I mean, now I'm an expert in family relationships, and it's kind of fun to see.
That's one of the great things in it, if I can actually say that out loud, in Game of Thrones, is we have the main character whom everyone loves, Tyrion Lannister, and everyone and his sister and his father completely despise him. Why? Why would they, you know, and they're not shy about telling us why. You know, they have to keep reminding us of why these things have happened.
Yeah. And I mean, I give it away in the prologue. Let's say in the prologue, I describe the event that caused some of the trouble in the family, and of course, here's this boy starting to turn into a man, having some friends, trying to cope with the idea that his family rejects him, and he's making friends with an injured dwarf. And it's really fun to see that, and she really kept at it. You know, why is he doing that? Why is he doing that? And wow, that was so fun to read, and she really helps me develop this whole thing. And that's where I learned to ask all these questions. If I have a new character, I start asking myself questions. Why does he do what he does? What are his scars? And I don't mean physical scars. Every person has experiences that leave scars on the soul. That, I mean, I wouldn't always call it trauma, but if if you're dealing with a fantasy hero, it's easy to create trauma.
But how much of that stuff do you work out before you start writing?
Not a whole lot. Usually it starts coming to me while I write.
That's the same thing that happens. I mean, people on writing lists keep posting these, you know, character biographies that go on for pages. And every time I've seen one of those, I've said, "You're right." I know generally what age range they are. If I know their exact age, I know that. I know what gender they are. I know what sexuality they have. I know what race they are. I tend to write in the real world, even if I am writing about zombies. So I don't have dragons or anything. And then I find out stuff as I write. And the two things I start with are, what do they want and what do they need?
Yes.
And the want is usually the external plot, and what they need is sort of the character arc to the end.
Yeah. Yes. And I mean, what they want and what they need doesn't have to coincide. I mean, usually it's aligned. I mean, like my hero, that boy, he desperately wants to be acknowledged, and he does a lot of things just to have his father actually look at him. And there's a good reason why his father can't really look at him.
Well,
which my poor hero doesn't know.
Well, the biggest cliche in Hollywood fiction is, you know, the young starlet who desperately wants to be seen and loved by millions, and what she really needs is the reaction from one person, right? And then all of her problems will be solved. Sorry.
Well, my hero struggles with that basically through the entire series. I mean, at the end of book 5, his whole life and situation has changed, and I'm not going to spoil, but basically his family is no longer in a position to judge him. So he ends up there basically having this position and having the world look at him, and he's not particularly happy.
When does that ever stop families from judging you, please?
Well, he does have a very close friend.
There's a reason prophets are not accepted in their own.
Absolutely, yes. But yeah, I really think that's essential to have. I love these questions. What does he or she want, and what do they need? Because they're the driving force for the character.
And sometimes filling out a few things on these character biographies can be useful. Like, if your character's a lawyer, did they go to Harvard Law, or did they go to the University of American Samoa? Sorry, I Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul reference there. You know, there's a difference in type of lawyer they're going to be. So that might be good to know. But I personally think filling out those complete character biographies where you write down everything, because you're going to find that stuff out as you go along. And
Yes.
I think you just fill up your brain with too much stuff that you're like, oh, they went to Harvard and they lived on Trenton Street and I should describe their apartment. It's like, please don't.
No,
describe it if you have to describe it, and not before then.
Yes. And I know this character sheet stuff, I think it has its roots in role-playing games where you actually have a character creation sheet where you write in the numbers. I mean, I've played Dungeons and Dragons mostly.
Yeah.
I have a couple of the core books up there on the shelf.
I believe we have complete sets of different versions. So.
And yes, you have these character sheets with all your abilities and traits, and you have your inventory in there, basically, that. And it makes sense in the game system. But if you're writing about your hero, that information is not going to help you.
Yeah.
And you really will only find out what kind of person this is by the reaction to things that happen, and by following this person in their development. And I mean, you could set up things like, how is your character going to react if someone insults him or her, or if they end up at a drunk party, what do they do?
Well, there are various personality systems that we as various cultures have come up with over the millennia to describe personalities, and sometimes using those as shorthand can be useful. The one that everyone has probably heard of is, of course, astrology. Where it's like, I still remember this. I was like 22 or 23, and I was at lunch with some people at work. And this guy I was talking to was talking about his ex-girlfriend, and he goes, yeah, she's a real Scorpio. And this had no meaning for me. I had no idea what this meant. I'm like, what does that mean? And I think people really like stuff like astrology because it's like, I can use shorthand for all of these traits. And then, of course, the more you get into astrology, it's like, well, I don't really feel like a Leo because they're supposed to be proud and vain and stuff. And it's like, well, you have, you have Taurus rising. That completely changes your personality. And it's like, there's so much stuff in the astrological chart. I should throw in here that I had some friends who are really into it, so I learned an awful lot about astrology at one point. That you can find anything you're looking for in an astrological chart. But if you describe your character if you know astrology and you describe your character as a Gemini, and that means something to you, then I would make that note next to your character. That's a real Gemini. If it doesn't mean anything to you, why would you write it down?
And I'm honest, I'm keeping a cheat sheet with like hair color, eye color.
Oh yeah, that's actually a great thing about Scrivener that I will get into at some point. Is like, if I write down she has blue hair and yellow eyes. Wait a second, I don't write fantasy, but if I write that down, I can select that description and say, add to her character sheet. So that next time I go back to look at it, I'm like, oh, look, I did describe what she looks like. So I'll just put in that plug for Scrivener right there. A lot of people like the Myers-Briggs for, what is it? Introvert, extrovert, judging, feeling.
Yeah,
I've never been able to get into. I'm like, people are like, what's your Myers-Briggs type? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I tried to take those tests, and they keep coming out differently. So I just, and I mean, the funny thing is, like, yes, I'm a coach, but I don't work with these character trait systems.
Yeah.
I don't even want to work with them because, yes, they're shortcuts, but they also, what we say in German is it lets you put people into a drawer. That's what we're saying.
I'm sure we have a saying like that, because I totally agree with you. It's like, I have worked with a therapist, therapist, who won't use terms like narcissist or sadist, or I'm trying to think of whatever these terms are, because that just allows you to put that person in a box. Oh, that person is and then you're done dealing with them. And it's like, no, they're still people. There's degrees of things. There's
absolutely.
Yeah. So.
And I don't like tagging people with that kind of description. I don't like putting that onto their foreheads and just treat them, this is a whatever psychologically unstable person.
Yeah.
No. They're first and foremost a person.
Yeah. I think that if you're, I think that if you, like, say you're writing a story about a narcissist who works really hard to become a billionaire tech CEO. Not that we have any of those around. If all of the character traits you give him are those that are commonly associated with narcissism, you're going to have a really boring character. You're going to be like, what? Why does anybody give this person the time of day? It's going to take some work on your part to make them more than just a narcissist, or more than just an Aries, or more than just an INTP, or whatever.
Or a whatever, H on the Enneagram. I mean,
yeah. Well, I just read this book. So speaking of, it was a short book. It was a really short book. Enneagram is another character typing system that I have liked. Again, it runs into the same problem as astrology, in that, but then you have wings, and a healthy person, a healthy 8 goes to 2 or whatever. So you're zinging, zagging everywhere. Anyhow, this book that I read about developing a character with the Enneagram, if you didn't already know the Enneagram, you wouldn't understand what this guy was talking about. But then he was talking about how to show this character getting more and more crises. And I'm like, yeah, no, that it's not going to work. That is just throwing stuff at, that's not developing the character. Okay, speaking of character, okay. So something a lot of people do is casting with Hollywood stars. And that can work.
Oh, yes. I like that
very much.
He spends more time casting than actually writing. And I know a lot of people do that, and they create a soundtrack for their story and all that kind of stuff. And to me, it's basically, excuse me, that's very judging, but to me, that's procrastination.
You don't think that that's a useful shorthand to begin with?
I think
it reminds you what they look like. For one.
Yes, it does. And I sometimes do that, and I sometimes stumble over pictures, and I think, whoa, that's my character. Like, I remember this moment years and years ago. I was walking into our train station, and you have to know the main train station is adjacent to the biggest cinema complex that we have in town. So they have these movie posters all over. So I was walking to that train station and looked around, and my eye was riveted by this picture of a guy with a sword, looking kind of wild. And I thought, oh my God, that's my hero. And turned out it was Aragorn.
Oh. Apparently he's a lot of people's hero.
And it was just this one movie picture that looked like my hero. He doesn't actually look like my hero, but this one picture where he was just shown on the side, you don't see this chin that he has. And I think it's from the scene where they start charging the orcs at the very end. And of part 1, Fellowship of the Ring. I tried to buy this picture. I actually tried to find it online. I have not been able to. I have not been able to localize that picture again.
Wow, that's interesting.
So
it was on
that was really frustrating. So I have this brilliant picture that is my hero, and I can't find it anywhere. but it happens rarely. No problem. But when I was shown the cover of my latest book, The Wild's Journey, here's a plug. It has this slightly Asian-looking woman on the cover, and she's really intense. She has just released an arrow, and she has this glossy black hair, and I was like, yes, that's her.
Yeah, no, that's the best when you can come up with something like that.
So I love that, but it really happens already. I sometimes don't even have a clear image of their face, and I can still write the story, because you do not need that. You need a concept of your character, but you do not need necessarily a face.
Yeah.
So if you find a face, perfect, but don't waste weeks and weeks of creating your cast when you should be writing.
Oh yeah. Well, the way that I start out, because I don't start out with complete characters, and this will often result in needing to rewrite as I discover things about the characters later on, is a technique that I learned from a screenwriting consultant named David Feldman, which is kind of hilarious because I actually have a friend named David Feldman who is a venture capitalist. But David Feldman came up with this pretty interesting method, which was come up with 4 character traits for your character. And the key thing is that 3 of them can kind of be on the same continuum, and 1 of them has to be diametrically opposed to the other ones. So one of the examples he gave was Hannibal Lecter. Why is Hannibal Lecter so fascinating? He's homicidal, he's manipulative, and he's, what was that there? He's homicidal, he's manipulative, and he's, well, he's certainly insincere, that's for certain.
Yes.
But the 4th one was, he's chivalrous.
Oh.
And that's the reason that it's like, that's a really intriguing character. We don't know what he's going to do next. But if you look at every single thing he says or does, it fits under one of those character traits.
Makes sense, yes.
And I was thinking about that with a couple of characters who have fascinated the public. I was thinking about that actually, like with Cersei Lannister. I'm like, why does it? Well, she's homicidal. She's condescending. She's incestuous. She really loves her kids. She's a terrible mother, but she really loves her kids. And it's like, you know, that does make her kind of fascinating. Something that's completely diametrically opposed to the rest of her behavior. So I have tried to keep that in mind for developing characters.
That's a really interesting thing.
3 really strong character traits, and then 1 diametrically opposed. So
yeah, and I mean, I read a lot of things, and I'm just going to throw this in here because many writers think that their hero has to be special, and I've read a lot of stories where the hero is basically beautiful, powerful, very skilled, and well, the word for that is a Mary Sue.
Yeah.
And in fact, the opposite is true. That kind of character, this perfect character who just overcomes obstacles gracefully and easily, is not an interesting character at all. It is boring to read how this person succeeds again and again, sort of like dancing through the story, just spreading their
what I think it's really interesting, though, is that was brought up for female characters. I think that if we spent a little bit of time, we could probably come up with dozens of male characters who are very familiar to everyone.
Michael Sues.
Yeah. I believe the term is actually Gary Stew.
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah.
I never heard of it.
But it was originally developed for female characters, interestingly enough.
Yeah, Gary Stew, I love that.
Yeah.
But yes, basically, I think again, going back to this human story loving, I think we like to see people struggle because, hey, who does not struggle in their own life? I mean, who has this brilliant life where success just falls from the sky and just carries you up? Nobody does. So we like to see people struggle, but we also like to see them succeed in a way that we can follow, in a way that we can possibly apply to ourselves. So I tend to come to characters in a different way. I really follow the why. So I watch my characters do something and they like to surprise me. Because
how do you start though? I mean, do you start with the situation, with the kind of story you want to tell, or
The funny thing is sometimes I don't even know the story. I have this brilliant fragment that is more or less a dream of this person waking up on the shore of a lake. He was kind of probably hit. I mean, he's waking up concussed and woozy and everything, and he gets up. And he basically sees this dead body floating in the water, and it's a girl. And he takes out, he pulls her out and says he can't leave her in the lake. So he pulls her out and carries her to the next village, which isn't really far. And they basically arrest him on the spot for murder. But there's a special ring that she has in her fist, and it's not his. And basically, then the idea was to start, a little fantasy detective story where he finds out that was the ring. And I never got there. I never plotted it. I never figured out who he really was. But this is how I start. I have a scene. I watch my character do something, and then I start asking why. I mean, why didn't he just go away? He's obviously a person who has a soft spot for girls, or maybe a sense of propriety. And he's also not someone who steals jewelry, even though he may be a mercenary. He's a person with honor, and he must look rather wild if a village just points to him and says, "You killed her." So I have a couple of basics about this character already just by watching him within the scene. And then I keep asking why. That's the best question you can ask. Why is he doing this?
Absolutely. I have read a couple of books where it's clear that the plot was in motion and the characters were along for the ride. And if your story is turning into one damn thing after another, like building with no characters finding out anything about themselves as well as other things, then reevaluate.
I mean, seriously, if the Bratty Princess stays bratty through 4 different sequels, I'm not interested.
It's tough though, because you don't want to develop them into being chatty people who would be your best friends. They have to retain those distinctive characters.
Yes, but they can grow their traits, and they can actually learn how to.
Well, how do you describe? Oh, I'm just looking at the time here. How would you describe growing, though?
Okay, let's take the Bratty Princess. Let's take her. She's spoiled. She's spoiled rotten. She throws temper tantrums, whatever. And if you look at that kind of trait, you can tell she has a strong sense of what she wants. A very strong sense of what she wants. And you can start looking at what kind of events would it take to turn her, to sort of polish away the brattiness and expose this inner core of a very clear personality, very strong inner personality. She could be forced to use that sense of herself to prevail in very difficult circumstances. I mean, like, just throwing this out there, if she were, to be captured in a fantasy setting and sold as a slave or just as a whatever bounty, her brattiness would get her a lot of trouble. I mean, seriously, nobody would put up with a bratty slave. But I mean, this is very cliche, but bear with me. But
They get to be cliches for a reason.
If she can maintain this inner strength, the inner core of who she is, and the parts that make her this strong person, and possibly a person who will never give up the idea that she is someone special who belongs into a high class, even if she ends up in the pits. Mm-hmm. This could see her through, but it would completely transform this brattiness into something else. She could learn to use her sense of, I need to do something, and possibly her smarts that she should have, might have, whatever, and combine that and create solutions out of that. That would be a story I would probably enjoy reading. How a bratty princess turns that trait into a survival ability, and prevails in the end, and of course comes out a different person at the end, because she has no longer a need to be bratty and throw tantrums. She possibly turned into a very strong young woman with principles, and survive that horrible time with scars. She must change, but that would be a way of taking a negative trait, a character flaw, basically,
right,
and turn it into something else through whatever experiences she has.
Okay, I like that. The idea of turning, keeping the same trait, but sort of twisting it a little. I like that. That's a good way of describing character growth.
Reframing a trait, basically.
Yes, reframing it. Oh, look at this. It's all coming together now, people.
This is a coaching term. It comes from neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. Right. And it basically means you look at something in a different way. You just put a different frame around it, and reframing. And I use that a lot as a coach. And I think you can actually use that process to change a character trait from something negative into something positive.
Right. I like that. Yeah, it's all your perspective on the matter. Yes. And of course, how the character understands themselves as time goes on.
Yes. And I think you as a writer provide the environment for the character to learn about him or herself, to learn and to be forced. I think that's the part of it, to be forced.
I think that's something we have to discuss at some point, because I know I've certainly suffered from, gosh, I should really make this a lot easier on my characters instead of a lot harder, because I always think making a lot harder, well, I could just kill them, couldn't I? Developing obstacles for your character. I will put that on the list.
That will make an interesting, yes. That would be an interesting meeting, session, whatever, podcast.
Yes. So next week, there is a book that Hannah has read and I have not, because I was off reading this not very good book about the Enneagram and character, called Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker. And Hannah has been like, read it. So I will read it this week, and I will have a link to that. And then I believe next week we are going to discuss Take Off Your Pants by Libby Hawker, which is a book ostensibly about how to outline your book that takes into account characters. Because so often with outlining, it's do this, do this, do this, and then we get to the end of Act 1, but there's more to a story than just crap happens. So,
yeah, I really like that. But again, as any writing advice, you need to take what you need out of it. But we'll talk about that next week. And until then, have a good day. Have a good week.
Have a good week, and we will see you then. So this has been the 21st Century Writer Podcast. My name is Diane Patterson.
And I'm Hannah Schkenbach.
And talk to you next week. Bye.
Bye.